Hey everybody, Lee with LG Speed and Custom here. So lately we've been focusing a lot more on the LG Speed side rather than the LG Custom side. But in this video, that's going to change as we take this beautifully restored 1959 Ford Galaxie two-door hardtop and bring it down to a whole nother level. Let's pull this thing into the shop and I'll show you what we're gonna do. You guys remember Steve Tilleys? Just over a year ago, Jim and I played hooky from work one day and drove up to Courtenay where Jim bought his 1951 Meteor, the car he'd always been after. So he bought that from Steve. Now, a year later, Steve has brought us his 59 Ford and asked us to put it on air ride for him. So to do that, we're going to be replacing the rear leaf spring suspension with this universal 4-link kit from Welder Series, some Slam Specialty sleeve bags, and up front we're going to be replacing the stock coils with these Slam Specialty. I think these are number 6 or number 8, can't remember. I think number 6. Anyway, the Slam Specialty bags up front. We're going to be managing this whole system with AccuAir, which has not arrived yet. It is still being shipped here, but we don't need that right at this point. That's one of the last things to go in. Right now, the first thing we're gonna start focusing on is getting this rear 4-link in. So the first thing we're gonna do is walk around the car and measure from the floor up to some point and mark where our factory height is. That way, when we are all finished, we know exactly how low the car has gone. Pretty straightforward process. We'll just put a little bit of tape on here and measure from the floor up there and mark it. 19 inches. Do that all the way around. You might notice that sometimes the car doesn't sit level. In this case, that side of the car is an inch higher than this side of the car. That's another reason why it's handy to measure first. That way when you get your car all laid out and it doesn't quite sit level, by measuring it first, you know if it sat crooked before and if there's just something weird about the car, or if there's something weird in your suspension design that caused it to sit level. So that way it kind of rules out some of the variables before you get into that situation. It's pretty common, especially for these big 50s cars, to not be perfectly level. Who knows what happened over the years? Maybe some springs were replaced or some springs are sagged out. Who knows? This car is like, over 60 years old. So who's to say what kind of life it's had? The important thing is when we're done, as long as we can get it, pretty level or close to level, then that's a win. We're gonna put it up in the air now, blow all the wheels off, hubcaps and wheels, and get into this 4-link. This Welder Series 4-link kit is a build-it-yourself kind of thing. They send you everything that you need, and then you just weld it together. They also offer an option where it's fully welded, but it's a little bit more. I just wiped everything down with some non-chlorinated brake clean. It's important when you're welding and brake cleaning to use non-chlorinated stuff, because if you use chlorinated brake clean, you die. We don't want to die. It's pretty straightforward. These guys fit together like that. Center it up on there, tack it, and then on the bar, this end, same thing. You center it up and you tack it. We're going to tack everything first. That way, if we have to change anything, it makes life so much easier. We'll do a little time lapse of tacking all this stuff together, and we'll push the bushings in and maybe put it under the car. Put some bushings in now. They give you a little bit of grease to put around the bushings so that they don't squeal or squeak or make sounds. Also makes them a little bit easier to get in and out too, because for this to all get painted, it's gonna have to come apart again. So just smear a little bit of that on there. Stuff it in. The kit comes with the little axle brackets as well as the brackets that mount the front of the bar, random plates, random tabs, pretty much everything you need to make it work. We'll go mock one up. Okay, if this end here attaches to the axle, and this end here, I know needs to be flush with the top of the frame rail. The reason I know that is because I reviewed my notes from the last car I did, which is Ryan Isherwood's 57 Ranchero. Same chassis, so it should be pretty much the same system. This bowler will fit in there, and this should go up in there. We're going to have to remove this emergency brake bracket right here, which is no big deal. It's just a couple rivets and it'll come off. We'll have to find a new spot for that. Ryan's Ranchero did not have this. It had an aftermarket, like a low car e-brake in it. So we'll have to figure that out later, but that's not a concern right now. We just need to get it out of the way. When we're mocking this up, we want from here to that side and from here to that side to match. They got to be square with each other. The cool thing about these cars is we don't have to C-notch it. In fact, on Ryan's Ranchero, we didn't even have to take the bump stops out for it to sit really stupid low. So that's nice. You'll notice I haven't taken any of the leaf springs apart at all, and I have the weight sitting on the axle so that the car is essentially at ride height right now. I like to do it that way because this way all our factory pinion angle and suspension geometry is the way that it was from the factory. So if we build our 4-link to fit that, get it all mocked up and tacked in there, then when we remove the leaf springs, our geometry should still be to factory specifications. All right, we'll knock some rivets out. Well, with this e-brake out of the way, got a jack stand and a zip tie holding that end up, and we can see where this side needs to be now. If we take this bracket that came with the kit and slide it up in here, kind of like so. If we come from underneath here, we can see this bracket doesn't quite sit totally flat against the frame. So we'll take a Sharpie and trace the frame contour and then just whittle that bracket down to fit nice on the frame. Also, I thought I'd mention while we're doing all this, you want to make sure that this is set 90 degrees to the car. To do that, I just pulled the angle using my angle finder off the frame rail here on a relatively flat spot. And then we can match it on here. If this is a little bit further back or a little bit further forward, it's going to change the position where this sits. Because obviously if it's angled back, this is gonna pull back. So you wanna make sure that that is kind of roughed in where you want it to be before you start fitting this guy. I've also took this little grease pencil and just made a couple little marks on here so that if it does get jiggled around or whatever, because there's only a magnet and a zip tie holding this in place right now, that way it you can easily just clock it back to where it needs to be. On second thought, I think I'm just going to make new ones from scratch, because by the time I whittle this down enough, like that's 1.5 inches it's got to go in, and I'm concerned there's not going to be enough meat left by the time I cut 1.5 inches off of there. So we'll take this over to some construction paper and basically trace the same pattern, but 2 inches bigger. There's our new template. It's important to color coordinate your templates with the car as much as possible. In here, we can just kind of start tracing the shape that we need it to be. This is much easier to do with 2 hands, so I'll probably not record most of this, but you'll figure it out. Once you've got your template made, you can just lay this on some 1/4 inch plate, trace it and cut it out. Or I drew it up on the computer here and we can cut it out with the CNC plasma. If you're doing a project like this, I would be happy to cut these out for you and mail them to you. Just get in touch with me on Instagram at LG Customs or on Facebook at lgspeedcustom.com. Wait, no. Just LG Speed and Custom. All right, here's our bracket. Let's cut it out. Cut it out, would you? I don't know if you noticed, but I have these little bumps on here. I put those in when I drew it up on the computer, and that was so that I knew where to fold it. Now that it's folded, you just watched me do that in my little homemade press brake. We can just take a grinder, grind these off, and then we'll go see how they fit in the car. All right, we've cleaned some paint off here, and this should sit right about there. I think we'll tack it in and then maybe move on to the next step. I just put 4 little tacks on here to hold it, and then I made sure that we were still at 90 degrees on this end here, and I fit this piece up and just put 1 little tack. This might need to change, but for now it'll hold it just until, like, we need some sort of baseline to go off of. So now that we have this here, we've got our baseline. I think we can do a mirror image on the driver's side. Then once we know how far apart this is gonna be from the other side, we can take our back ones and make sure they're the same and square them up on the rear axle and tack them in place. Also, keep in mind when you're doing this, that this bolt, you have to be able to get it out. So if it was going the other direction, if the nut was on this end, the bolt would hit the frame before it came out of the bushing here. Learned that the hard way. Naturally, on the driver's side here, we've got a gas line right there, right where I got a weld, and it's sandwiched in between there. So that's gonna be fun. Do we take a gamble and weld right next to it? Or do we fight and try to get it out? Probably, I think we should probably take it out. I don't want to die. So I relocated the fuel line to a spot where I was comfortable with welding and fit this this driver's side bracket. And then I tacked our front 4-link mount symmetrical with that side. To do that, I just measured from the rear end housing to, let me put this bolt somewhere, to this bolt here, and they were both 26.5 inches. From there, we fit our second bar, mocked this up, made it symmetrical with that side. They're both exactly the same distance from the backing plate to the mount. We set our angles exactly the same using the angle finder here, and then made sure that our bars were the same length. They're sitting there tacked in place now, just loosely, because I got a little ahead of myself and didn't get the paint ground off here before I fit it. So I'm going to clean the paint off here next, and then we can tack these a little bit better, and our lower bars are done. They are, our distance from here to here is the same here and here, and then if we cross measure from this bolt to this bolt is the same as this bolt to this bolt. So we know we're square in there. We can start on, once we get these tacked, then we can start with the upper bars. Jim Dandy is over here pulling the carpet and the back seats out because we're going to have to cut into the floor a little bit, as well as we're going to lift the drive shaft tunnel a little bit. So we'll pull the interior out. That way this beautiful salmon, coral, macho, pearl vinyl does not get damaged. So for these upper bars, we've got these two tabs that go on the axle. One goes one direction, the other goes the other direction, and that allows the top bar to sit crooked on the axle, which is what makes it a triangulated four-link. With a triangulated four-link, you don't need a panhard bar, because with this bar going this way and this bar going this way, they fight each other when the axle goes side to side. When I did this on Ryan's Ranchero, I actually cut the floor out and built a tab off the upper part of the frame rail. But on this, I don't know if I need to. I think I came up with a better way. I made these cardboard templates and mocked those up, and they seem to fit pretty good, but they're a little bit floppy. So I cut some other basically heavier templates out of some 14 gauge sheet metal that I had laying around, just because it's a little bit heavier and not as flimsy. And I think I can make it work without cutting the floor. Let's go underneath and I'll show you. Okay, I hope everybody can see okay. Well, this guy sits up on the axle tube like that, and then these two guys that I made will reach all the way up to this factory cross member up here, which is kind of cool. We've got a slight downhill on our upper bar, which is what we want, and obviously you probably can't see from that angle, but it is triangulated. So I think I'm going to make some of these out of 1/4 inch now. These are just the 14 gauge ones. And once we get them set up in there, we can build some gussets, because this is like 10 inches. So I want to gusset it really nice so that it doesn't flex side for side. We'll probably go from here to here, and then maybe from here over to the frame rail. What I'm liking about this is, one, we don't have to cut the floor, which is super cool. And two, I don't think we have to cut the factory exhaust. I think this exhaust system is just going to sneak right by everything. I think. I don't know. All we can do is try it and see. So we'll go cut some of these out and maybe see about taking this to a little bit further. Well, I've been doing that. Jim's working on the front. He's going to make the airbag cups. Basically, he's pulled the coil spring out, and the airbag is going to go in place of where the coil spring was. So he jacked it all the way up, and we found out what the total bottomed out distance is from the top of the coil pocket to the bottom of the coil pocket. We determined what our total collapsed height of the airbag is, which was pretty simple. We Googled it, and then we didn't believe what Google said. So we put it in the press and squished it down, and Google was right. So our total compressed in the car from the bottom of the coil pocket to the top of the coil pocket is 7.25 inches, and our bag fully compressed is 2.75 inches, so that's 4.5 inches. From our notes on Ryan's Ranchero, we've determined that the bottom needs to be 1 inch, which Jim is laying out right now, and then the top cup will be 3.5 inches. These will weld to the pieces that Jim's making right now, and then that's what actually bolts to the airbag. Sounds confusing right now, but it'll make sense in a bit. I cut these guys out and got them bolted in here. Then I went and cut this bracket out, or not a bracket, but a gusset, I guess. A reinforcer. The enforcer. This is going to go in there like that. Ooh, so nice.
Well, that fits pretty good with that little gusset speed hole piece welded in. So it's just tacked. I think I'm going to take this back out now and we'll fully weld it, because if we continue, we'll never be able to get back in there and weld it. I welded 2 of these up and I test fit it under the car, tacked it in place, and it looked good until I looked at it from this angle and the bar was kind of sitting cockeyed like that. Wasn't a huge deal though. We just had to open this end up a little bit. If we compare it with the other one, come on, get in there. You can see right here, we had to just open that up a little bit with one of these guys, and it fits pretty nice. So I'll trace this, grind it out, and fit the other side. Well, I've got these pieces all tacked up in here and they're not going to work. I'm going to change them. I think I need to change the length of this top bar. If you come and look at it from this angle, they are going way too far downhill. And we need, in a perfect world, you want this length, this angle, and this angle to form a triangle that meets at the front bumper. And these aren't doing that. These are forming a triangle that meets like right here. So we can shorten this top bar a bit to get it to come up here. Now the problem with shortening the top bar is now when the rear end goes up and down, the pinion angle is not going to stay exactly the same. But because we're going with an AccuAir setup on this, the majority of the driving will probably be set or be at ride height 2. AccuAir has like preset settings and the car will stay at that height. So if we shorten this to bring it up and then set our pinion angle to be correct at ride height 2, in theory, we should be fine. So I'm gonna take this end here apart and kind of shorten this down until we're at an okay angle. I've marked out how much I want to shorten this bar. I need this little beveled area to be here. So I'm going to use a tubing notcher for that. This just goes in your drill press and rigs up a hole saw, and that allows you to cut through tubing and it'll give it that little radius end so that this bushing will sit flat against there. So now, this being beveled like that, this fits really nice in there. So we'll cut this old side off and re-tack this on our shortened bar. So while I've been doing all this 4-link stuff, Jim's been working away on these front bag cups here. These are still sticky. This one goes on the bottom. The bag bolts on here, and then this little 1-inch ring sits in the bottom of the control arm in the little cup where the coil spring used to sit. This goes up from the bottom into the airbag to stop this from moving around while it's in there.
On this one does the same thing, bolts to the top of the bag. This goes up into the coil arm, or the coil pocket. And this little threaded rod goes through where the original shock used to be. Now, this isn't very heavy, but it doesn't need to be. This is only to hold it in there when you jack the car up so that it doesn't fall out. The rest of the time, this will sit in the coil cup and the pressure in the airbag will hold it in place, just like how the pressure on your spring holds the actual spring in place.
Round 2 back here is going considerably better. We went from these big honking mounts to just these little guys way up here. And our bar is on an angle that I am much happier with now. I also triangulated a little bit more. We moved the rear end side a little closer towards the tailpipe, which allowed us to get less of an angle and keep a little more length. So I'm very happy with that. If we take this out, this will articulate nice all the way up and touch the floor before it hits this bar, which is good. We did have to cut the shock mount, the factory shock mount off, because the bar was going to hit that. But that's the only thing we've had to cut on this car so far. So, round 2, much better. We'll throw this away. That was just a disaster, but you know, sometimes disasters happen. Both sides are tacked in. This is going 1,000 times better than round 1. We'll have to reroute this brake line somewhere, but that's not a huge deal. And we might have to slide this pipe over a little bit. I don't know if it's going to clear or not, but that's also not a big deal. So I think we're going to pull these bars off now and probably final weld everything.
This is just a bushing driver. It fits in there really nice, and then we can press it out.
Got all these 4-link bars back in the car now. This end here is still only tacked because we got to do a lot of welding when we put the airbag mounts and everything in. So we'll probably just pull the rear end right out of the car. I think I've only got 1 tack on each of these. I think I might put maybe 2 or 3 just to make it a little more secure. Then we can go ahead and take these leaf springs out, and the 4-link will be the only thing left holding the car in. From there, we can put the floor jack underneath here, lift the rear end as high as it will go, see what kind of deal is involved in clearing these pipes. I think when I tested it before, this side cleared the pipe, and I think this side, it just tickled the pipe, but there's a lot of side-to-side movement in these, so I think we can make it work. Before we take these leaf springs out, it's sitting at ride height right now, and from this point on the floor to this bolt right here is 10 1/8. So I wrote that on there, 10 1/8. And I also put the angle finder across here, and at 10 1/8 we are at 2.5 degrees. So that's kind of where we want our pinion to end up when we're at our final ride height. While I've been in the back working on the 4-link, Jim has been up front working on relocating the shocks. So originally the shock went in the coil spring, but we can't put a shock through the middle of an airbag, obviously, so we have to relocate the shocks off to the side here. This kit is from Specialty Auto Fab in Kelowna, and it uses the stock shock. It just fits in the top like that, and the bottom fits on there. With it mounted in this location, the suspension bottoms out on the bump stop just before the shock completely bottoms out, and the suspension maxes out at its height just before the shock fully extends. We got nice clearance this way for when the tire is turned all the way. So I think these are tacked in now and ready to be final welded. In the back here, I put a bottle jack under the rear axle and jacked it up all the way until the drive shaft has hit the floor, and the pumpkin back here, the back of the rear end, has hit the floor there. That's as low as we can go without cutting the drive shaft tunnel, which I guess we're about to do next. If we cut the drive shaft tunnel, we can get another 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches of drop through there. As far as our tailpipes go, they aren't so much hitting the 4-link bars, or the 4-link tabs, as they are hitting the back of the axle. But I think this exhaust system here, if we cut it right here, we can slide the tailpipe back a bit, which will get the center of the arc over top of the center of the axle, and that should stop it from hitting back here. I think that's a pretty easy fix. As far as that brake hose that we had, I think it'll be okay. We might have to just tweak it a little bit because it's just touching that bar and we don't want it to rub, but that is pretty minor. As far as our drop, I measured from that X on the floor to our bolt, which was 10 1/8 before, and it's like 5 1/4 now, so that's almost a 5-inch drop. And then if we can get another 1.5 inches by cutting the floor, that'll be like a 7.5-inch drop. It's pretty awesome.
Check out that wheel tuck, isn't that great? Imagine if this thing had skirts on it, it would look, as Jim mentioned earlier, it would look like a boat just sitting on the water, which is super cool. So I think we're gonna call this video here. We've got the 4-link in, we've got the front suspension is basically done. Jim's gonna blow a little bit of paint on those shock nails so now that they're all welded, and then the front can all get buttoned up. The airlines are roughed in for the front. So in the next video, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start on this floor. We're gonna raise the drive shaft tunnel up. We're gonna clearance the back and the trunk floor there. so that the back of the rear end fits up in there. And when we get the rear end sitting as high up in there as we can go, then we'll start building airbag mounts. From there, we still got to put an air tank in it, the air compressors, plumb and wire the air management system. So make sure to subscribe and hit notifications so that when the next video on this pops up, you know all about it. And if you want to support the channel, please check out lgspeedcustom.com. Get yourself a LG Speed and Custom t-shirt, stickers, parts. I'm taking notes on this so that hopefully if there's enough interest, we can maybe start putting together a kit for these 57 to 60 Ford cars. Because I know when we did Ryan's 57 Ranchero, a lot of people asked me about it, but I didn't take a lot of notes on that one. So this one I've been documenting everything on so that hopefully we can, make something so that you can put this in your car at home. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later. What you doing?
Scuffing it up.
I didn't push record. Oh yeah, I did.